It all started in the fall of 1993, deep in the forests of Washington. A group of loggers set up a temporary camp to begin work in an isolated area. The location was remote, far away from any roads or towns. They brought everything they needed: tents, food, tools, and a radio for emergency contact. There were 6 men in the crew, all experienced, all tough. But none of them were prepared for what they would face. One of the men, a logger named Rick Morgan, had been on dozens of jobs before. He was the kind of guy who never got scared, never backed down. But this place felt different. From the moment they arrived, something felt wrong. The trees were too quiet. No birds, no wind, just silence. Thick, choking silence. The first night, they heard strange sounds. It was just after midnight. Rick was sitting by the fire, sipping coffee, when he heard it. A deep, rumbling growl from beyond the tree line. It didn't sound like a bear or any animal he knew. It was long and angry, like something massive was warning them to leave. The others heard it too, and for a moment, nobody spoke. Then one of them laughed nervously, calling it just the woods playing tricks. But Rick knew better. By the second night, the fear had set in. One of the men, Jake, went missing. He left his tent to use the bathroom and never came back. They searched for him all morning, shouting his name, combing through the thick forest, but there was no sign, no prints, no blood, no broken branches. It was like he vanished into thin air. That night, Rick found something near Jake's tent. It was a bloody journal, pages torn and stained, but still readable. The entries were from Jake. The last few pages described being watched, hearing heavy breathing outside his tent, and footsteps circling the camp at night. The final line chilled Rick to the bone. It's not an animal. It knows we're here. It wants us gone. By the second morning, 2 more men had disappeared. No one saw them go. Their tools were still in place, their food untouched, their boots sitting neatly by the fire. Rick and the remaining 2 men were terrified. They tried to use the radio to call for help, but all they got was static. It was as if something was jamming the signal. Rick stayed awake that night, shotgun in hand, watching the woods. The fire burned low, and he felt eyes on him. Deep, angry eyes. Then, just beyond the trees, he saw it. A tall, shadowy figure covered in thick black hair. Its eyes glowed red in the dark, and it stood at least 8 feet tall. It didn't move like a man. It didn't sound like an animal. It was something else, something ancient. It stepped forward slowly, and Rick fired a warning shot. The blast echoed through the trees, but the creature didn't flinch. It just stared at him, and then, just as slowly, it backed away into the dark. Rick didn't sleep that night. He didn't even blink. By morning, the other 2 men were gone. Rick was the last one left. He packed what he could and ran. He didn't care about the gear or the job. He just needed to get out. He ran through the forest for hours, heart pounding, hearing heavy footsteps behind him the whole way. He didn't stop until he found a ranger's station on the edge of the woods. Rick never returned to logging again. When he told the authorities what happened, they searched the camp. But there was nothing left. No signs of struggle. No blood. No bodies. Just empty tents and a burned-out fire. And the journal Rick claimed to have found? Gone. People say Rick lost his mind out there, that he imagined it all. But the fear in his eyes, the way he shook when he talked about it, said otherwise. He never spoke publicly again. He moved to a small town and kept to himself. To this day, nobody knows what happened to those missing men. Their families never got answers. But some believe the forest holds secrets, that there's something out there, something powerful, ancient, and angry that doesn't want to be found. And some say that on quiet nights, if you walk deep enough into those same woods, you can still hear it breathing, waiting, watching. The dense forest surrounding Lake Hollow had always been a peaceful place, a sanctuary for campers and nature lovers who sought an escape from the noise of the city. The towering trees, the quiet rippling of the water, and the serene isolation made it the perfect spot for those wanting to disconnect. But there was something about Lake Hollow that the locals never mentioned to outsiders. The forest had a dark history. A history that no one dared to speak of, not even when the disappearances started. It was the summer of 2009 when Kyle, Sarah, and their two friends, Jessica and Mark, decided to go camping at Lake Hollow. They had heard about the lake from a friend of a friend and thought it would be the perfect place to unwind. The forest had a certain allure to it, a pull that they couldn't quite resist. They set up camp on the outskirts of the woods, far enough from the water to avoid any unwanted disturbances, but close enough to enjoy the picturesque view. Little did they know, they were about to experience something that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The first night was uneventful. The group gathered around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and telling stories, their laughter echoing through the woods. The wind rustled the trees above them, creating a soft, comforting symphony. But as the night wore on, something changed. The atmosphere became heavier, the laughter started to fade, and a cold shiver ran down their spines. There was an unease in the air that no one could ignore. Around midnight, as the group settled into their tents, they heard it, the faint sound of screaming. At first, it was distant, barely audible over the sounds of the forest, but then it grew louder. It was a scream, high-pitched and full of terror, echoing through the trees. Sarah's eyes widened as she sat up in her tent, her breath catching in her throat. "Did you hear that?" She whispered to Kyle, but he was already sitting up, his face pale. "I heard it," Kyle said quietly, his voice tinged with fear. "We need to get out of here." The others were awake now, each of them listening to the sound as it seemed to come closer. It was unmistakable. A desperate scream of someone in agony, followed by the sound of something heavy crashing through the woods. But there was something unsettling about the noise, something wrong. It didn't sound human. Mark was the first to suggest they investigate. It could be an animal in distress, he reasoned, but deep down, they all knew it wasn't. Kyle reluctantly agreed, and the four of them grabbed their flashlights and cautiously stepped outside their tents, scanning the dark, oppressive woods. The screaming continued, coming from deeper within the forest, but it wasn't like anything they had ever heard before. It wasn't the cry of an animal, nor was it a human scream. It was like both, combined in a way that made their blood run cold. The group followed the sounds, walking cautiously through the trees, their footsteps barely making a sound against the dry leaves on the ground. The moonlight barely cut through the thick canopy above, casting long, twisted shadows that seemed to move on their own. As they ventured further into the forest, the air grew thick with tension. The trees, once serene, now seemed to close in around them. The forest felt alive, alive in a way that was unnatural. Every sound was amplified, every whisper of wind seemed to carry a warning. Suddenly, the screams stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, they stood still, not sure what to do next. The forest was deathly quiet, and the only sound was the pounding of their own hearts. Then, from the shadows, they heard something. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, and far too heavy to belong to any animal. Jessica let out a soft gasp, gripping Mark's arm. "What is that?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. They turned their flashlights toward the sound, and that's when they saw it. Standing in the distance, just beyond the reach of the light, was a figure. A tall, dark shape, its eyes reflecting the light of their flashlights in a sickly yellow glow. It was too tall, too broad to be human, and as it stepped into the light, they saw something that made their blood freeze, a face, twisted and grotesque, covered in dark, matted hair. It was the creature they had been hearing about, the thing that had been rumored to haunt these woods. The figure moved slowly, almost deliberately, toward them, its feet making no sound against the forest floor. Its eyes locked onto Sarah, and for a moment she felt a wave of terror wash over her, a deep primal fear that told her to run. But before they could react, the creature let out a horrible guttural growl that echoed through the forest. It was a sound that rattled their very bones. In an instant, the group was running. Panic set in as they sprinted back toward their campsite, the forest seeming to come alive around them. Branches scraped against their skin, and the shadows seemed to stretch out and grab at their ankles. But the screams, the terrifying human-like screams, followed them. They could hear it now, right behind them, as if the creature was never far behind. They reached their campsite, breathless and frantic, but the creature was gone. The screams faded, leaving only the sound of their own ragged breathing in the still air. They didn't sleep that night, not a single one of them. And when morning finally came, they packed up their things in silence, each of them haunted by the events of the night before. The group left Lake Hollow and vowed never to return. But they weren't the only ones to experience the terror of that forest. Over the years, many more people would venture into the woods, only to disappear without a trace. And every year, as the anniversary of their disappearance approached, the forest would scream once more, echoing through the trees, reminding everyone that something was still out there, something that hadn't forgotten. To this day, no one knows what lurks in the heart of Lake Hollow. Some say it's a creature, something ancient and evil. Others believe the forest itself is alive, feeding off the fear of those who enter. But one thing is certain: if you hear the screams of the forest, you should run, because it may just be the last sound you ever hear. It was a quiet night on Highway 16, a stretch of road that wound through dense forests and desolate stretches of land. Driver Ray Walters had been on the road for hours, hauling a load of cargo for his company. The headlights of his truck cut through the darkness, the occasional flicker of a distant streetlight the only sign of civilization. The air was thick with fog, and the tires clumped steadily against the pavement. Ray had driven this route countless times, but this night would be different. He could feel it. As he rounded a sharp bend in the road, the fog seemed to swallow everything around him. Visibility was almost non-existent. That's when it happened. Something appeared in front of his truck out of nowhere. He barely had time to react. He slammed his foot on the brake, and the truck screeched in protest as it slid toward the dark figure standing in the middle of the road. Ray's heart raced, adrenaline flooding his body. He was too late. The truck slammed into the figure with a sickening thud. The truck's dashcam footage captured it all. The blur of movement, the grotesque impact, and then, just as quickly, the figure vanished from view. Ray came to a halt. He sat frozen for a moment, his breath shallow, eyes locked on the spot where the figure had been. There was no blood, no body, nothing at all to suggest what he had just hit. He stared at the dark, empty road ahead, his heart still racing. He rolled down his window, straining to hear any sound, but all that greeted him was silence, the kind of silence that seemed unnatural. The kind that made you feel like something was wrong, deeply wrong. Ray fumbled for his phone, dialing the emergency services number, but the call failed. No signal. Of course, there was no signal. He was in the middle of nowhere, miles from the nearest town. His eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something, someone, emerge from the darkness, but there was nothing. He opened the truck door slowly, the cold air biting at his skin. His legs were shaky as he stepped out onto the road, his flashlight beam cutting through the fog, but still, nothing. He scanned the area for any signs of what had happened. The road was smooth, unmarred by any sign of impact, and yet his truck had definitely hit something. The tension in the air was palpable, and Ray's instincts were telling him that something was horribly wrong. The hair on the back of his neck stood up, and he could feel a presence, an oppressive feeling that gnawed at his very core. His heart nearly stopped when he heard it, a rustling noise behind him. He whirled around, flashlight in hand, but there was nothing there. The road stretched endlessly in both directions, the fog swallowing everything whole. He stepped back into his truck, slamming the door behind him, and tried again to call for help. Still nothing. Desperation clawed at him. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw something, a figure in the distance, moving in and out of the mist. It was tall, much taller than any person had any right to be, and the way it moved, so unnaturally fast, made Ray's blood run cold. The creature seemed to glide through the fog like it was part of it. The shape was dark, its features indistinct, but Ray could feel its gaze on him. The hairs on his arms stood on end as his mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The figure seemed to approach, and Ray quickly slammed the truck into reverse, his hands shaking as he drove away from it, his tires skidding across the slick asphalt. The creature didn't chase him. It just stood there, watching, a hulking shadow in the mist. Ray didn't stop until he reached the nearest gas station, a small run-down place with flickering lights. He was visibly shaken, his eyes wild with panic. The clerk, a bored-looking woman, barely spared him a glance when he entered. But when he looked at her, he noticed something that made his stomach churn. There was a dash cam recording on the counter, the same kind of recording device he had in his truck. It was then that Ray realized something horrifying. The footage from his own dash cam, the footage of what he had hit, was missing. The tape had been corrupted, wiped clean, as if someone or something didn't want him to have proof of what had happened. Ray tried to tell the police, but when they went to investigate the site of the accident, there was no trace of what had happened. No blood, no tire tracks, no body, just an empty stretch of road. He showed them the dash cam footage, but it only revealed the strange blur, the moment of impact, and then nothing. Over the years, Ray tried to forget about that night. He told himself it was a freak accident, maybe even a hallucination brought on by fatigue. But deep down, he knew the truth. He had seen something that didn't belong on this earth. It was out there in the fog, and it was watching. To this day, no one knows what happened that night on Highway 16. Some say it was a man, some say it was a creature, but no one really knows. The dash cam footage was lost, the evidence gone, and the only thing left are the stories, the rumors, and the lingering fear that something is still out there, waiting for the next driver to make the same mistake. And the question remains, what did Ray Walters really hit that night? Was it human, or something far, far worse? The farmhouse stood alone at the edge of the woods, like it had been forgotten by time. Paint peeled from its wooden bones. Its windows, tall and crooked, watched the world with a blank, empty stare. Ivy curled around the porch like fingers clinging to an old secret. The trees around it were tall and still, always too still. No birds sang near the house. Even the wind seemed to quiet when it reached that property. Some houses look haunted. This one simply looked like it remembered too much. Ella had never liked the farmhouse. Even as a child, when she visited during summers, she had refused to sleep alone. The floors always creaked too loudly. The shadows seemed too thick. But after their parents died, there was nowhere else to go. So she and her younger brother Ben moved in, just the two of them. A fresh start, they thought. A place to grieve in peace. The land was quiet, the neighbours were far, and no one came around much. At first, it was what they needed. The quiet felt kind. But quiet doesn't stay kind for long. It started with the floor. Late at night, Ella would lie in bed and hear faint tapping sounds, then scratching, not from the walls or windows, but from directly beneath her floor. She told herself it was just mice. An old house like this surely had a few. She set traps. Nothing was caught. Still, the noises grew louder, more frequent. Some nights, it sounded like footsteps, slow, dragging steps, moving just beneath her room. At first, she blamed her imagination. Then she stopped sleeping. One night, long after midnight, she woke suddenly. The house was silent, but there was a sound. Breathing. Slow. Deep. Wet, almost. Like something large was exhaling right under her bed. She didn't move. She didn't even blink. The breathing went on for a full minute, then stopped, as if it noticed she was awake. Her heart pounded. Her body was frozen. She stayed like that until morning. Ben laughed at her the next day, said she probably had a nightmare, but his eyes gave something away. He was pale, and he kept glancing at the floor. That evening, as they ate dinner, he finally admitted it. He'd been hearing things too. Whispering, voices under the floor. And one night, just before he fell asleep, he swore he heard someone say his name. They searched the house together, every room, every crawl space. Then they went down to the basement. The air there was colder, thicker. Dust hung in the light like smoke. In the far corner, behind a pile of rotting firewood, they found something they hadn't seen before. A square outline in the floor. A trapdoor. It was covered in dirt and old nails. It hadn't been opened in years. Ella wanted to leave it alone. She said the house was old, full of strange things. But Ben was curious. He always had been. That night, when she was asleep, he went down alone with a crowbar. She woke up to silence. No sound from Ben's room. No sound from the basement. Just a heavy, humming quiet, like the house was holding its breath. She got up and went downstairs. The basement door was open. Cold air crept up through it. She called Ben's name. No answer. When she stepped into the basement, she saw it. The trapdoor was wide open. A black hole yawned in the floor. No ladder. No stairs. Just darkness. The smell hit her first. Earth. Mold. And something worse. Something rotten. She stepped closer, her voice shaking as she called again. And that's when she heard it. Breathing. Not her own. Not Ben's. Something was breathing in the dark. It was louder now and closer. She couldn't see anything, but she felt it. Something looking up at her. Watching. Waiting. The cold rolled over her like a wave. She slammed the trapdoor shut and nailed it closed. She didn't sleep that night. She didn't even sit down. The police came the next day. They opened the trapdoor and sent a team into the tunnel. What they found made one officer quit the force. The tunnel stretched deep under the house and out into the woods. Along the walls were claw marks, dozens, hundreds, some old, some fresh. Bones were scattered across the floor, some animal, some human. And there were carvings, strange symbols, faces without eyes, spirals that went nowhere. The team followed the tunnels as far as they could, but they never found Ben. Not a shoe, not a flashlight, not a single sign. Ella left the farmhouse. She moved far away, to a city where the lights never go out and the noise never stops. But the silence followed her, and sometimes, when she's alone at night, she hears it again. That slow, deep breathing, just beneath the floor. It was supposed to be just another school field trip, 12 kids, 1 teacher, and a walk through the woods. Dark Pines Forest had always been part of the curriculum, a quiet patch of wilderness an hour from town, where teachers showed students the basics of orienteering and forest safety. But on that cold, grey morning in October, something was different. The air felt heavier. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was watchful. The group stepped into the trees around 9 a.m. Emma, the quiet girl at the back of the line, had a strange feeling as soon as they crossed under the first arch of branches. She didn't speak much, but she always noticed the things others didn't. How the birds stopped singing when they passed. How the wind vanished the deeper they went. Their teacher, Miss Harper, led them confidently. She was young, friendly, and new to Oakwood Middle School. She talked excitedly about moss and deer tracks, but the students weren't paying attention. They were too busy messing around, laughing and snapping photos. The woods seemed harmless until the trail vanished. No one noticed right away. They'd been walking and talking, and suddenly there was no path beneath their feet. Just thick roots, pale mushrooms, and a sudden feeling of being very alone. Miss Harper stopped, frowning. "That's odd," she muttered, pulling out a small trail map. The kids gathered around, confused. Emma looked over her shoulder. Something moved between the trees. She saw it for just a second. A tall shape, silent and still, like it had always been part of the forest. Then Sarah screamed. They turned around, but she was gone. One moment she had been beside Josh and Rachel. The next, nothing. Just her blue backpack lying on the ground. No footprints, no sound. Nothing. Panic set in. Miss Harper tried to keep them calm, but she was shaking. They called Sarah's name. They split up in pairs, searching nearby. No one found anything. When they regrouped, another child was missing. Leo, the tallest in class. No one had seen or heard him leave. Miss Harper radioed for help, but the line was dead. They tried retracing their steps, but the woods had changed. Trees they had passed earlier were gone. New ones stood in their place. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt right. The woods weren't letting them leave. Night fell faster than it should have. The light died without warning, and the temperature dropped. The kids huddled close while Miss Harper tried to start a fire with shaking hands. Somewhere in the distance, a deep groan echoed, too loud to be wind, too long to be any animal they knew. They didn't sleep. One by one, more students vanished, without sound, without struggle, just gone. Sometimes one would scream just before it happened, but the scream would cut short, like it was swallowed by the trees. Emma didn't sleep. She stayed awake and listened. She saw shapes move beyond the firelight, tall, heavy shapes. One of them came closer, crouching low as if it were studying them. She saw eyes, glowing red-orange eyes. They locked onto hers, and the world seemed to stop. And then, it backed away. By sunrise, only Emma and 2 others remained. Miss Harper was gone too, her jacket and broken glasses left beside the smouldering ashes of the fire. The 3 kids wandered dazed. At some point, Emma blacked out. She woke up in the hospital. Rescue teams found her walking out of the forest alone, barefoot, covered in scratches. The other 2 children were never found. She wouldn't talk for days. When she finally did, her voice was flat. Empty, she said only. It took them. Authorities searched Dark Pines for weeks. No trace of the others. No tracks. No signs of struggle. Some believed the kids got lost and were taken by animals. Others whispered darker theories about the history of the land, the native warnings carved into old trees, the stories of tall creatures living deep within. Emma was sent to therapy. Her drawings showed a tall man with fur covering his body, arms too long and teeth like broken stone. The doctor said she was traumatized, delusional. But years later, she came back to Dark Pines. Not as a student, as a survivor. She filmed herself walking through the forest. Her voice was calm now, but her hands still trembled. "I know what I saw," she said into the camera, "and I know it's still here." She walked to the place where Sarah vanished. She placed a small toy there, a stuffed bear. The wind howled. Leaves swirled. She turned off the camera. That footage was found on her phone 2 weeks later, after hikers discovered it on the forest floor. Emma was gone again. There were no signs of struggle, just her footprints, leading into the woods, then nothing. They say the forest of Dark Pines takes what eye. If you like these stories and want more dark mysteries, subscribe and comment below. New stories come every week, strange, scary, and hard to forget. There's always something hiding in the dark. Don't miss what comes next.